Hey guys, welcome back to Based MMA. In this video, we're going to be talking about what's next for the winners and losers of UFC 300. And we're starting off with the main event. Alex Pereira defeats Jamahal Hill by knockout in the very first round. I know that Alex Pereira wanted to make a quick turnaround to fight at UFC 301, but I do think that's kind of a bad idea. It's pretty unrealistic, especially since I'm pretty sure Magomed Ankalaev hasn't been training for UFC 301, and I know that Alex Pereira wants to move up to the heavyweight division, which is respectable. I respect his ambition, but I think it's kind of a bad idea, especially because Alex Pereira has been doing absolutely incredible at 205. Look, I thought the UFC fight was an early stoppage. The fight with Jan was pretty controversial. But now, look, he defeats Jamahal Hill, and you look at the names on his resume, it's absolutely incredible. And I think it's better for Alex Pereira to clear the 205 division, and I think he could be able to do that if he faces Magomed Ankalaev next. I think that's the fight to make next. Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev. Probably not happening at UFC 301. I think that's a bit unrealistic. But let's make it happen for the summer. Let's make it happen for maybe the July card, maybe the September card. I think just because Magomed Ankalaev is a Russian, they might try to make that fight in Abu Dhabi. And I don't know if Alex Pereira wants to wait that long, especially since he just had a pretty clean performance over Jamahal Hill. I know he's asking for a heavyweight, but like I said, I just feel like it's too much of a risk. And if you're not really fighting Tom Aspinall, like what's the point? You know what I'm saying? Maybe they want to make the Tom Aspinall fight for July. Alex Pereira versus Tom Aspinall for UFC Manchester in July would be pretty crazy, would be pretty incredible, would be pretty exciting. I would like to see that now that I'm talking about it, but I think the most logical next opponent for Alex Pereira is Magomed Ankalaev, and I think if he's able to beat Magomed Ankalaev, his resume would be absolutely incredible, and he pretty much just cleared the 205 division, and then he could maybe move up to fight the heavyweight champion, whoever that is. Right now is John Jones. We know he's going to come back to fight Stipe Miocic, most likely retire. We all see Tom Aspinall as the real champion of that division, so then you could make that fight. Maybe Tom Aspinall gets a defense over Curtis Blades. That would be pretty incredible as well, but I think Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev is a logical fight next. The problem is that I don't know if Alex Pereira necessarily wants to wait until Abu Dhabi, or maybe they put him in the Australia card. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to put him in Australia or put him in London, especially if he's not fighting Tom Aspinall. And then international fight week is Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler, so he's not going to be there. And then UFC 302's Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. So right now there's not really a lot of spots for Alex Pereira. Maybe they put him in UFC 306 at the Sphere, but we know that they want to push Sean O'Malley versus Merab as the main event of that card. I don't know if that necessarily makes a lot of sense. So I think most likely what's going to happen is Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev for UFC 308 in Abu Dhabi. Do I think it's fair that, Alex Pereira has to go defend his title in Abu Dhabi? No, but right now there's really no other card where I could see them putting Alex Pereira in. And I think it's not a very smart move right now to move up to the heavyweight division, when I think he's like one more win away at 205 from really clearing the division and becoming one of the best fighters of all time. Maybe not top 5 like I said in my recap video, but maybe top 10. Now, for the loser of this fight, Jamahal Hill, right? I didn't think he fought all that bad. He got caught in that first round. He was fighting from southpaw. He wasn't really able to land anything clean. Alex Pereira did a pretty good job of using his lead hand to stop the right hand of Jamahal Hill. But really the fight was very, very short, and Jamahal Hill got knocked out. I think this is going to be a big, hit to his ego, to his confidence, which in a way it's kind of good, man, because Jamahal Hill was very salty coming into this fight. I know he kind of does that to kind of hype himself up and hype up the fight, which I respect, right? Because we have a lot of NPC UFC fighters, but Jamahal Hill needs to go back to the drawing board and really think about his career and where he wants to go. And I still think he's a pretty good 205er. I just think Alex Pereira might be a bad matchup, and I think he has too much confidence in his striking, and he had never faced anybody like Alex Pereira, and he really wasn't able to do anything to Alex Pereira. He got beat worse than Yuri Prohaska did, and I think that's the fight to make next right there. Jamahal Hill versus Yuri Prochazka. Yuri Prochazka is coming off a crazy victory over Alexander Rakic, where he was getting absolutely destroyed in that first round. But we know Yuri Prochazka has a lot of power. He's a warrior. Jamahal Hill is also a warrior. He just got knocked in the first round. He didn't take like a crazy amount of damage. And I would love to see this fight maybe for the Sphere. Like one of the fights in the Sphere, Jamahal Hill versus Yuri Prochazka. What a banger. I could also see Jamahal Hill versus Yuri Prochazka being one of the fights on the main card of a Madison Square Garden card, maybe later down in November. But I think Jamahal Hill and Yuri, they kind of want to get back in there because, you know, they're coming off injuries. They weren't very August. Maybe you put them at UFC Perth as one of the fights on the main card. That's absolutely incredible. So I would love to see that next. Now moving on to the co-main event, we had Zhang Weili defeats Zhang Weili by a unanimous decision. And I think Zhang Weili should fight Tatiana Suarez. I mean, there's really no other contender. Tatiana Suarez was supposed to fight Amanda Lemos, got injured, pulled out of that fight. And right now, there's really no other contender. Zhang Weili has basically been clearing her division. And I would love to see Tatiana Suarez, somebody that's a great grappler, that has, you know, great takedowns, great submissions. And Zhang Weili, lately, she's not been wanting to strike. And she's going to have to strike against Tatiana Suarez because Tatiana Suarez is probably better than her on the ground. So I really think that's the fight to make next. It's a very, very intriguing matchup. And I think it's also a matchup where Tatiana Suarez can actually win. Obviously, we need to see how she comes back from that injury. But I really do love that matchup. I think it's a very logical matchup for Zhang Weili. Now, moving on to the loser, Zhang Weili. I think Zhang Weili should probably face Amanda Lemos. I actually don't even know if she's already faced Amanda Lemos. I'm going to go and assume that she hasn't faced Amanda Lemos. So I think that's the fight to make next. Now, moving on to Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje. I'm sure this is the one you guys care about. Max Holloway just defeated Justin Gaethje is on a 3-fight win streak. One over Arnold Allen, the next over Korean Zombie, and then now over Justin Gaethje. One of his best performances in his career. What is next for Max Holloway? Max Holloway right now has a lot of options, right? I think the fight to make next is Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria. Why? Because I don't want to see Volkanovski get the rematch. I know he deserves it, but I think Volkanovski still needs more time off. And why not make Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway? It's an incredible matchup. Not hyped after to just engage all the hype in the world. I think that's the fight to make. I think you have to make that fight next. Now, assuming that the UFC gives Volkanovski the rematch, which I understand, right? Volkanovski has done a lot at featherweight as a champion. So I understand why they would give him an immediate rematch. So assuming that they give Volk the immediate rematch against Topuria, and that happens like later in the year, maybe August, October, whenever that happens, then give Max Holloway the winner of Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor for the BMF belt, especially if Conor McGregor beats Michael Chandler, because Max Holloway versus Conor McGregor for the BMF belt is a huge fight, one of the biggest fights you can make. And why would Max Holloway not want to have that fight back? You know, they fought way back. Conor McGregor was able to beat him by decision. And I think like if Conor McGregor was able to knock out Michael Chandler, which kind of unlikely, right? Under all these circumstances that Conor McGregor is coming into this fight, you know, leg injury, hasn't fought in a while, you know, doesn't really take the sport that seriously. But let's just say that Conor McGregor is able to chin Michael Chandler, because Michael Chandler has terrible fight IQ. He's very chinny. Let's say Conor McGregor beats Michael Chandler. Conor McGregor versus Max Holloway? That would be an incredible fight for December, November, Madison Square Garden. Why not, man? Why not? So I think Max Holloway right now, he has a lot of options. Personally, I would prefer the Ilia Topuria fight, because I want to see like how this new Max Holloway, this improved Max Holloway with power, with momentum, does against Ilia Topuria, who just defeated Alexander Volkanovski. I like the story there of Max Holloway avenging Alexander Volkanovski. I think it would sell. I think that would be one of my most anticipated fights that you can make right now. So I love that. So let's assume that they make Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria, or maybe he fights the winner of Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. Now for Justin Gaethje, I don't like to say this about fighters because I don't know what they're thinking, but I think Justin Gaethje should retire. And I know that you're gonna be like, oh well, why do you think he should retire? You know, he just got knocked out. Whatever. The reason why I think Justin Gaethje should retire is because Justin Gaethje has come out and said that he doesn't really want to fight if he's not fighting to get to the title. And I just feel like after a knockout like that, and let's be realistic, let's be honest, Justin Gaethje was not winning that fight. Actually, in fact, he was getting outclassed. Like, it wasn't like the fight was very competitive and then he got knocked out in the last 10 seconds. You know what I'm saying? That's not what the fight was. Max Holloway was clearly winning. And if Max Holloway wouldn't have decided to fight in the phone booth and baited him in those last 10 seconds, excuse me, Justin Gaethje would have still lost a decision, a very clear decision, probably a a 4-1 rounds to Max Holloway. So, you know, he can't just say, oh, I just got knocked out or I just got caught. No, bro, you got absolutely dominated. Like I said, I don't think Justin Gaethje wants to fight if he's not fighting to get to a title. So I think Justin Gaethje should retire. Maybe the Dustin Poirier fight down the line. We'll see what happens between Poirier and Islam Makhachev. Let's say Poirier loses, which is a probable outcome. Then maybe you could make Gaethje versus Poirier. But it's like, I don't... Gaethje doesn't strike me as a guy that wants to stay here if he's not going to try to fight for the title. So I think Justin Gaethje, unfortunately, is going to retire. He took a terrible knockout loss. He's probably not going to fight this year. And if maybe he wants to come back next year, then we'll see the landscape of the lightweight division. But right now, I think Justin Gaethje should take some time off, maybe retire, and not fight until 2025. Now, for the winner... Now, Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. Obviously, Arman Tsarukyan wins a split decision over Charles Oliveira, where I thought it shouldn't have been a split decision. I think Arman Tsarukyan won a clear 29-28 decision. Arman Tsarukyan did incredible, did exactly what I thought he could do if he won this fight, and that's exactly what he did. And Arman Tsarukyan, in my opinion, should face Islam Makhachev, right? Obviously, I'm assuming that Islam Makhachev defeats Dustin Poirier, which is not a very big assumption. I think most people are going to be picking Islam Makhachev to defeat Dustin Poirier, and I think Arman Tsarukyan has earned his shot, man. He has great wrestling. You know, I still don't think he's all that on the feet, but maybe stylistically it could be an interesting fight against Islam Makhachev, and we gotta see how Islam Makhachev does against Dustin Poirier. I mean, if he just absolutely destroys Dustin Poirier, let's say he knocks him out, then maybe he does the same to Arman Tsarukyan. But I still believe that's the fight to make next. Arman Tsarukyan versus Islam Makhachev, or maybe Dustin Poirier if he pulls the upset. It's MMA. Anything could really happen. Arman Tsarukyan versus Islam Makhachev for Abu Dhabi. I think that's most likely what would happen next if Islam Makhachev is able to defeat Dustin Poirier. Now, for my boy Charles Oliveira. My boy Charles Oliveira. You could have won this fight, brother. You could have won this fight if you pressure more, use your striking a little bit more. But it is what it is. Charles Oliveira lost, and I think he should face Mateusz Gamrot next. A heavy grappler, doesn't have crazy power, doesn't have great hands, is kind of chinny. I think that's a very winnable fight for Charles Oliveira. Obviously, Gamrot could also win, but with control, with pressure, kind of like Arman Tsarukyan did. But he's not as dangerous when he's on top of you as Charles Oliveira. So I think that's the fight to make next. Charles Oliveira versus Mateusz Gamrot. I don't think Charles Oliveira wants to be too inactive. So I would like to see that fight maybe in July, August, maybe September. In the Sphere, you make Charles Oliveira versus Mateusz Gamrot as one of the fights on the main card, and then the UFC Sphere is like an amazing card. So Mateusz Gamrot versus Charles Oliveira, let's make it for UFC 306 in the Sphere. I think that's the fight to make next. Now for Bo Nickal, he just submitted Cody Brundage. Let's make Bo Nickal versus Roman Kopylov. I think that's the fight to make. I mean, we've seen Roman Kopylov struggle with grapplers. He's a very dangerous striker. We really haven't seen Bo Nickal really be tested in the striking. Obviously, he could still, maybe even if he faces, let's say, Roman Kopylov, maybe he still won't be tested in the striking because he's going to be quick to take the fight down to the mat. That's always a possibility, but I would still like to see him next. He needs a step up in competition, and I think Roman Kopylov makes sense. I know that Roman Kopylov has a fight at UFC 302, but after that fight, I think that would be the fight to make. Now, moving on to Alexander Rakic versus Yuri Prochazka. Yuri Prochazka was able to knock him out in the second round. Obviously, I already told you that I believe Yuri Prochazka should face Jamahal Hill, probably for Madison Square Garden, maybe the October card, but they should fight sometime soon. And then Alexander Rakic, obviously coming off a loss. He hadn't fought in 2 years, but I still think Rakic did pretty well. You know, I think it was kind of dumb of him to not take the fight down to the mat. Obviously, I was happy because I picked Yuri Prochazka, but I'm going to be honest, Yuri Prochazka was getting absolutely destroyed on the feet. You know, Rakic was landing everything, basically everything and anything. with his hands, with his kicks. And I would like to see Alexander Rakic versus Khalil Roundtree. I think that's the fight to make next. I would like to see it soon. Maybe Alexander Rakic versus Jan too, but I mean that first fight wasn't like anything all that great. But let's make Alexander Rakic versus Khalil Roundtree and let's see if he could get a dub. I think that's the fight to make next. Let's make it for UFC Perth. I think it's a fight that would make sense. 302, maybe. I mean, I don't know, maybe because if you guys think about it, the cards are filling up for the rest of the year pretty fast. I mean, we know UFC 302 in New Jersey. 303 is international fight with Conor McGregor. 304 is in the UK. 305 is in Australia. 306 is at the Sphere. 307 we don't know. Maybe could be Africa. 308 is Abu Dhabi. 309 is basically Madison Square Garden. So most of the cards are actually already filling up. So maybe you could put Raquel Pennington versus Kayla Harrison for the Sphere. I mean, it's not a fight that I really care about, but obviously it's not going to be a main event. It'll probably be like a one of the fights on the pay-per-view, one of the title fights, or maybe they could put it as a main event for a UFC fight night. I wouldn't mind that. I know you guys are gonna be pissed because like, oh, it's women MMA title fight. It should not be on a UFC Apex or not Apex or no UFC fight night. You know, it's disrespectful. But I don't really give a fuck. I think it should be next. So doesn't matter. I think that's the fight that they're going to make next, especially since Kayla Harrison had a pretty impressive performance over Holly Holmes. And Holly's next opponent should be Holm. Now, Diego Lopez just had an impressive win over Sadiq Youssef where he knocked him out in the first round. I thought Sadiq Youssef was going to be able to give him problems on the feet, but I was so wrong. Sadiq Youssef destroyed him. I mean, not Sadiq Youssef. Diego Lopez absolutely destroyed him in the first round. And Diego Lopez also is a guy right now that has a lot of options. Personally, I feel like he should kind of get boosted to the top. You know, I feel like you should make, you know, Diego Lopez versus Aljamain Sterling, or Diego Lopez versus Yair Rodriguez. I know that maybe he's not going to fight Yair Rodriguez. Maybe they're friends. I don't really know if they're friends or not. But Diego Lopez versus Sterling or Yair is a fight to make next. At first, I was going to give him Brian Ortega, but I think the UFC is going to make Mosver Evloev versus Brian Ortega, and then you could give Diego Lopez versus Aljamain Sterling, or maybe Diego Lopez versus Yair Rodriguez. Personally, I like the Sterling matchup a little bit more, Diego Lopez versus Aljamain Sterling, especially since Aljamain Sterling looks so dominant against Calvin Kattar. I think Diego Lopez versus Sterling would be a very interesting stylistic matchup. Sterling is a grappler. You know, Diego Lopez has power on the feet, crazy jiu-jitsu, non-stop pressure. I think it would be actually a pretty fun fight. I would like to see it. So let's make Diego Lopez versus Aljamain Sterling. Maybe Yair Rodriguez, that fight would also make sense. Or maybe even a Josh Emmett, but maybe I don't really want to see that fight. But I could see Diego Lopez beating Josh Emmett by submission, similarly to what Yair Rodriguez did to Emmett. But I think I like the Sterling fight a little bit more for Diego Lopez. Now moving on to Jalen Turner versus Renato Moicano. Moicano was able to TKO Jalen Turner in the second round because Turner's an absolute moron. So let's make Renato Moicano, money Moicano. Moicano wants money. Moicano. Let's make Renato Moicano versus Dan Hooker. I think that's an incredible fight. Let's make it happen for UFC 303 international fight because one of the fights on the main card. I think that's a great fight. Put him in the Conor McGregor card, and I think that would be an amazing matchup. Obviously, Dan Hooker's a striker, and Moicano's going to want to take the fight down to the mat, but Moicano has pretty underrated striking. And for Jalen Turner, you stupid fuck. Jalen Turner versus RDA. RDA could take him down. Turner could obviously knock him out. Don't really care too much about this fight. Let's make Turner versus RDA. Now for Marino Rodriguez versus Lope Godinez could be the fight that probably should happen next. I don't really care about women MMA. Andrade versus Virna Jindrabua. That weird looking girl. No disrespect to her, but that cross-eyed girl. I think Andrade versus the cross-eyed girl is the fight to make next. Now for Bobby Green, let's make Bobby Green versus Matt Frevola. I'm not too sure if they've actually fought already, but let's make that happen. I think that's a good fight for both of them. Obviously, Bobby Green is coming off that impressive win over Jim Miller where he just absolutely schooled Jim Miller in the striking for 3 rounds. And now for Davidson Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt, Figgy was able to get the submission in the second round. Let's make Davidson Figueiredo versus Song Yadong. At first, I was going to give him Peter Yan, but I think Peter Yan is going to face Marlon Vera. And I think Figueiredo versus Yadong would be a very interesting matchup. We saw that Figgy didn't really want to engage in the striking with Cody Garbrandt. Yadong has a pretty good takedown defense, so I'm pretty curious to see how this fight plays out. Figgy kind of has low volume, so I could see Song Yadong winning that fight. So let's make that fight happen. Now for Cody Garbrandt, you know, he didn't look all that bad. He got taken down and submitted, but on the feet, he looked pretty slick. He didn't get knocked out like a lot of us were anticipating. Let's make Cody Garbrandt versus Adrian Yanez. I think that would be a very exciting fight. Two strikers, two kickboxers. Obviously, Cody Garbrandt probably has an advantage. I mean, two boxers in my... Yeah, they're both two boxers. We saw Adrian Yanez get absolutely destroyed by Jonathan Martinez. Let's make Cody Garbrandt versus Adrian Yanez. I think that would be a fantastic fight. Maybe for a UFC Apex card. I know that when I say UFC Apex card, I absolutely get depressed. But, I mean, these Apex cards have to get better. Maybe Cody Garbrandt versus Adrian Yanez could be a co-main event or even a main event of a UFC Apex card, especially since Cody Garbrandt didn't look all that bad against Davidson Figueiredo. I think that's the fight to make next. So, guys, that is what should be next for all the winners and some of the losers of UFC 300. Make sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below if you agree or disagree, or you have any other matchups or great matchmaking that you can do for these next cards. Like I said, a lot of these cards are starting to get booked. I mean, we just got UFC 302, 303, 304s in the UK, 305 Australia, 306 at the UFC Sphere. At the Sphere, not UFC Sphere, at the Sphere, probably in Vegas. Yeah, it's in Vegas. UFC 307, we don't know. I think that's going to be the Africa card. And then 308 is going to be in Abu Dhabi, 309 Madison Square Garden, and I think December is probably going to be Vegas again. So yeah, guys, we're getting quickly booked. But yes, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.